Presumed guilty under scrutiny, the GRAP Files. Welcome back to Presumed Guilty. I'm your host, Roger Warstone. This is episode 3, Person of Interest. In episode 2, we laid bare the truth. The GRAP program was not a target scan run by greedy soldiers. It was a billion-dollar betrayal executed by high-level incompetence. We showed how the Army's desire for quick members led to a creation of three-layer financial mess: expensive internal help, ADSW, active duty special work, our regular recruiter pay, and the massive, unaudited external incentive system run by a private contractor, Docupak. We detail how Docupak's contract was legally suspect, how they treated our soldiers as mere subcontractors, and how the program rules, the first contact rule and no kickbacks, were essentially impossible to follow in a high-pressure, chaotic environment. The system was broken from the top down. Today, we transition from an anatomy of that systematic failure of the anatomy of the military's cover-up. The sheer scale of the waste, over $1 billion, eventually brought up political scrutiny, and the generals had to act. They couldn't admit to two major things. First, that they failed to oversee a colossal budget, and that they allowed a private entity to handle an inherently governmental function via an illegal contract. So they chose the lowest thing the Army could stoop to, the Scapegoat Protocol. The contractors, Docupak, realizing they were in deep legal trouble after making a little over $9 million after already getting paid. This is the money that they got paid. Administering the program began reporting alleged fraud leads to the Army as early as 2007. If they knew the system was broken, why didn't they fix it? Why did they choose profit over process? Why did Docupak, the administrative engine, and CID, the Army's top law enforcement, wait a staggering 6 years to mount a full investigation? The answer lies in checks and balances. They waited until the political heat was so intense that they needed massive public distraction. That distraction arrived in force in 2012, the CID Criminal Investigation Division. The U.S. Army, equivalent to the FBI, basically, was given directive from above, and the directive was simple: investigate everyone who fitted a predetermined narrative of criminal activity. This meant everyone: the recruiter assistants who were Docupak's subcontractors, the recruiters like me who follow up on leads, and even the recruiters used for credit. They needed to clean the slate and make it look like a criminal element was responsible for the money disappearing. This investigation was not about finding justice. It was about saving faces at the highest levels. We're talking about the leadership from commanders all the way up to AGs who refused to fight the obvious ethical failures. I recall one director of the National Guard being fired and others facing professional ruin. The last one standing clearly chose self-preservation, making a decision that would lead to one of the lowest moments in the Army history. They chose to ignore the money the state wasted on ADSW, Docupak's illegal contracts, and illegal diversion of funds to a civilian entity. The CID came in heavy without any care whom they were stepping on, including high-ranking commanders. All I can think is, if they did this to me, an established ethical recruiter, how hard must it have been for thousands of other soldiers? They conducted mass investigations, took money back from soldiers, including mine, with virtually no due process. For me, the targeting was even more perverse. I was brought into the scope of this massive 2012 investigation based on a previous unfounded investigation from 2005 or 2006. An issue I had already been reprimanded for and believed was settled, but they resurrected it, determined to use any thread they could find. This, my friends, is when the story gets intensely personal. That's a very strong setup for a pivotal episode. The structure highlights the high-level betrayal and brings the focus to your personal experience of being targeted. This segment is the targeting mechanism, the data versus the due process. The CID's directive was simple: follow the money and follow the data. But the data was just a trail of breadcrumbs leading away from the powerful and towards the convenient scapegoats. The investigation was driven not by evidence, but by the convenience of a data dump from Docupak that needed an easy conclusion. Of course, $9 million compared to $1,000 that a soldier get. Well, let's get the $1,000 from the soldier illegally, but let's not get nothing from Docupak, who did everything the legal way. Come on, man, you're serious? The resurrect reprimand. The worst part of the CID's targeting was their sheer determination to ignore due process. They were so desperate for high profile targets that they resurrected old closed issues. As I mentioned in the introduction, I was brought into the scope of this massive 2012 investigation based on previous unfounded investigation from 2000 or 2006. And what they used in order for them to go back that far was that we were still at war. So the time didn't really matter. And just to let you know, the war is, they're talking about the Afghanistan war, which at that time, Obama was already planning on coming out. And then in 2013, Afghanistan set up a new government. So there wasn't really a war. It was just them using that as a way of fighting the soldiers, always looking on how to screw a soldier over. This was an issue that had already been thoroughly investigated internally. I was questioned, I was formally reprimanded, a process that was extremely painful, but I took it. I accepted the reprimand and the consequences to move forward, believed the issue was settled. I did that to ensure I would never be brought up on that issue again. And in that issue of 3 of my soldiers were being threatened, so I decided to threaten the guy going after my soldiers, and he went back to my command, and the entire case ended up in 1 year reprimand, where if anything similar to what was brought up came up, they would do something to me. I agreed on it because I was innocent of what was said. So the fact that the reprimand had a year sentence, that was already surpassed, should have never surfaced. Case closed. But the CID didn't care about the due process or finality. The data point connected to my initial reprimand, combined with success and my relationships with high producing recruiting assistants, made me a perfect target. They didn't have to build a new case. They just dusted off the old week 1 and added the new political explosive GRAP data. The process of convicting a lot of these soldiers, and the reason I call it the scrutiny of what they did, is because they kept changing the law every year. If those laws weren't in place, nobody would have been able to be prosecuted during that time frame. And that was illegal to prosecute soldiers for those reasons. And the fact that leaders, generals, allowed things like this to happen makes me think twice about their leadership. The system worked like this. The recruiting assistants, they generate leads using their immense charisma. The Docupak system, Docupak, receives the leads and pays the recruiting assistant the first incentive, verifying he made first contact, a verification they were legally required to enforce, but which their automated one-day training system was utterly incapable of doing. The recruiter, me, I followed up and list the soldiers, bring them into the guard. Let me tell you something about Docupak. Docupak, if one of the soldiers enlisted somebody, Docupak will follow up and make sure that the soldiers were literally telling the truth. Every once in a while, Docupak will find somebody that wasn't telling the truth and they will send it back to CID, investigate those guys. That was it. You should have been investigating those guys. If not, CID has nothing to do with the National Guard. Send it to their command and have the command deal with it. But no, that didn't happen. If someone have stopped the recruiting assistant from getting paid when they wasn't the legitimate first contact, if the system had worked, none of this would have happened. Also, at the start of the program, a soldier will first get paid $500 and they will have to have some how save up the money to save the money from those $500 to pay those taxes. So at the end of the day, the soldiers were getting paid about $300 after taxes per recruit. But Docupak's incentive was the opposite. The more payments they processed, the more they validated their $9 million contract. So they weren't about to start a big investigation on anybody. They wanted to make more money. So I'm going to estimate and say that Docupak was getting paid probably per each soldier $300, right? So from all the money collected back from all the soldiers, which was thousands of dollars, they got collected. Docupak got paid. Why didn't they collect the money from Docupak? Why is it that we set off to decide the civilian world and forgot about everybody else? That doesn't make sense. Come on. This system should have been reviewed prior to being allowed to go on. They should have allowed other people to bid on this contract, not just them because they were their friends, because the guy was a friend of theirs. It should have never been like that. By resurrecting my old file and combining it with the massive GRAP data dump, the CID had already made a narrative, a repeat offender, a highly successful recruiter, and a high producing recruiting assistant. This segment is the moment of scrutiny and the leadership vacuum. You go through years in the military building a reputation based on loyalty, ethics, and production, only to have it vaporized in a single afternoon. I had successfully served my country, put myself through college, earned my master's degree around the same time this started in 2012, and was about 4 years from retirement. I felt betrayed by the very system I once worked for, but I kept pushing forward. Guys like me, though loved by many, are sometimes a threat. Not because we retaliate, but because resilience does nothing but pushes forward. I remember the very first day I knew the CID was actively investigating me. It wasn't a knock on the door, it was a cold, formal letter I received via mail at my apartment. It stated that CID had subpoenaed my bank records and that if I wanted to stop it, I needed to respond right away. I let things happen. I wasn't a thief. I honestly thought they were just fishing around trying to find out if I did anything or if I was hiding any money somewhere else. So they went through all my bank accounts, including accounts that I previously had back in the days. I'm not going to lie, it gave me the chills. I was hurt that this was how they chose me after all my efforts to recruit solid soldiers. I worked with CID before and I knew their operational culture. They ran their business kissing their leaders' asses, acting as if they were rulers of some powerful world domain. It feels like how some political leaders run the country today, surrounded by a bunch of yes men and women who don't have the integrity to stand up for justice. And the ones that stand up for justice, they are kept off to the side, kicked off as if they were somehow some type of ignorant individuals. This culture of self-preservation at the top meant they'd rather stage a spectacle than address the systematic failure. To stage that spectacle, the CID came in very quiet into the Pennsylvania Army National Guard without letting anything out about the investigation publicly. They established different tactics attempts to catch me in what they perceived to be an act of fraud. The surveillance was extensive and frankly highly unprofessional. They laid down surveillance on me day and night, and my phone was also tapped. I first became aware of them following me one time when I was at Dave and Buster's with my daughters, playing video games. Suddenly, a group of them came in, running into the building, looking for me, like they were about to catch some type of a serious crime. There were about four of them. Their clean cut hair and clean shaven faces gave them up instantly. I couldn't understand why these agents ran into their, like, truly wasting their money. How did they come up that I was gonna show up over there with who would what to do what? Didn't make any sense. Idiots. Then I figure out they had a GPS tracker in my car. The tracker was so poorly managed that the device would actually ring every time I got in the car. It was an extremely poor operational choice. I felt violated and it gave me chills most of the time. Knowing this was going on for months, I quickly calculated the waste. I charged $100 an hour for surveillance. And this agent sometimes had 4 guys on me. Whoever was in charge of planning this operation was profoundly incompetent. I also knew my phone was tapped because they would sometimes talk on my phone while it was ringing, or even when I was on a call with someone else. These investigators demonstrated a severe lack of skill, which confirmed my earlier hesitation about ever seeking a job as a CID officer. I already had a bad feeling from that place because of the way their leadership dealt with everything. If I was an outsider investigator, I bet half of them have committed crimes with their own organization and they think they have them hidden. You know why? Because they think they're above the law. They believe and they investigate without thinking about the other person, but they tell on each other. And those internal investigations never surface because they don't want outsourced investigations from another entity, because then people would really go to jail. So this is how I started to get a whiff of these agents on my ass. And to top it all off, my command still didn't know. These investigators were focused on me, not on alerting the structure above me. I was officially a person of interest under constant and poorly executed scrutiny. This segment is the conclusion, the immediate fallout, and the fight for honor. The surveillance went on for months, a constant chilling reminder that I was being hunted by the very forces I had dedicated my life to. All of this was happening while I was working towards my master's degree, a successful, dedicated soldier just 4 years away from retirement. The system's choice to come after me, a man of integrity and resilience whose efforts to recruit solid soldiers should have been praised, made me feel profoundly betrayed. I was a target because of the failure of the Adjutant General and the high level leadership who chose self preservation over ethical responsibility. They ignored the millions wasted on ADSW and the illegal Docupak contracts and instead focused the CID's unprofessional efforts on the lowest ranking soldiers. I will tell you this fight felt familiar. Fights like this have been with me my entire life, and my resilience does nothing but pushes forward. The military may have felt fascist, and guys like me, loved by many, a challenge to some, were forced to reckon with the reality that God was always at my side, pushing me forward and not letting anything touch me. The investigation was officially underway. They had turned their top recruiters into scapegoats, and the integrity of the Army's justice system was compromised by leaders who lacked the balls to stand up for justice. They thought they were bringing down a criminal, but they were simply igniting a conflict against an honest soldier. My mission now was clear. The fight for my honor had begun not against an external threat, but against the powerful, self serving entity I had sworn to serve. Next week, in episode 4, we will finally meet my focus of scrutiny, the recruiter assistant who became a key part of the CID's narrative and whose actions were used to dismantle my life. Was he a criminal or just another victim of the system? And how did CID manipulate his case to secure the narrative they desperately needed? Subscribe to Presumed Guilty Under Scrutiny to hear how I launched my counter investigation to find the evidence the military refused to acknowledge. Hi, and thank you for finalizing my last episode. My name is Roger Warstone. I'm a private detective and owner of Warstone Detective Agency. We specialize in the complex, the hidden, and the high stakes. Whether it's corporate theft, background checks, or unraveling a tangle of internal fraud, we know how to follow the money and we know how to fight the cover up. Don't trust your future to a flawed system. Hire the expertise that fought it and won. Contact Warstone Detective Agency. Visit Google and type in Warstone Detective Agency. You'll find us. When I need the truth, I had to find it myself. I turned my expertise in military investigations into a mission for everyone. That mission is now the Warstone Detective Agency. Thank you and see you next episode.